What is up, guys? We are back again, and in today's video we are going to discuss something that a lot of people make a mistake with, and it really does actually hinder you from achieving your goals. It really does actually put you back quite a bit, and unfortunately a lot of people make this mistake. I've made this mistake in my past. I see people when I bring them on for coaching, I see them having made this mistake, and once we solve this and we really solve this thinking, this thought process, you see results skyrocket. So we're going to solve the issue for you. We're going to make sure that you're not making this mistake going forward, right? So what is the mistake, right? And the mistake is spending the majority of your time in a deficit or thinking about getting lean, when we should really be thinking about spending the majority of our time actually in a surplus and actually building muscle, right? If you think about bodybuilding, the clue is in the name. It's body building, right? So you should be spending the vast majority of your time actually building the body, not actually chiseling away at it and showing the results of your hard work. That's the mistake a lot of people make, and I know that's a little bit unpopular. Everyone wants to have the six-pack, wants to be shredded, wants to look like they throw around weights, they have a lot of muscle, they're very lean, etc., right? But unfortunately, if you actually want to build appreciable amounts of muscle and you want to actually look like the people you see on Instagram or social media, if you actually want to look like them, you're going to actually have to spend some time eating in a surplus and training in a way that you actually build muscle. The key here is to stop dieting and to actually eat food, right? And you would think that's not actually a hard sell, but unfortunately it is. The vast majority of people spend the vast majority of their training career in a diet, right? They're focused on fat loss rather than focusing on actually building muscle. However, it doesn't just apply to bodybuilders. Unfortunately, a lot of people in just the general public also have this perception, because what you often see on social media is someone, this influencer that has already gone through 10 years, 15 years of building their physique, and now all they do is showcase it, right? So you get this impression that all these other people stay lean, incredibly lean all the time, and that's how they built their physique. That's what you need to do, right? When in reality, they spent a lot of time eating in a surplus and training to actually build muscle. And now they're just revealing it, now they're just showcasing it. They're not the same thing, but unfortunately, social media leads you to believe that they are the same thing. That what you do when you're trying to showcase your physique is what you should do when you're trying to build your physique. And it's just not the case, right? But here's the truth. Fat loss is actually incredibly easy. It's incredibly easy compared to muscle gain. You think about this. Like someone who is pretty knowledgeable about all of this health and fitness stuff, about nutrition, about body composition change, they could very easily get 2 to 3 kilos of fat loss per week. It's actually quite easy. You just need to eat in a deficit, and you need to expend enough energy so that you stay in that deficit, and you need to supply your body with the reason to keep your muscle, i.e. do some resistance training, and as a result, you get fat loss and you keep your muscle, right? Really straightforward. 2 to 3 kilos in a week, not unheard of. On an average, most people are trying to get 1 kilo per week, in fat loss spheres, 1 kilo per week, especially at the start of your diet, 100%, that's what people are aiming for. However, the most, and I mean the most genetically blessed among you listening to this, right? Or in the world, you're getting maybe, and especially more towards the beginning of your career, you're getting maybe 1 kilo of muscle gain per month, right? So if the most genetically blessed among you are getting 1 kilo of muscle gain per month, if you do everything right, and most people, and I say most people, they'd be able to easily get 1 kilo of fat loss per week, right? So we're already thinking there, okay, fat loss is actually so much easier than muscle gain. But unfortunately, most of you are not the most genetically blessed. You wouldn't be looking at all these videos and you wouldn't be searching for this information if it all just came easy to you, right? No, you're probably not the most genetically blessed, so you're looking for information. So let's say you can only gain 1/2 kilo of muscle per month, right? If you're a woman as well, you're probably even gaining less than that. You just don't have the anabolic advantage that men have, i.e. like the higher amounts of testosterone. So we're in a situation where you're getting maybe half a kilo of muscle gain per month versus I could easily lose, like me personally, I could easily lose 2 or 3 kilos of fat per week, and I could keep that going for 8 weeks. It should be obvious that muscle gain is incredibly hard when you compare it to fat loss. Fat loss is easy. However, we can't just look at the theoretical, right? We actually have to look at the real world, because why is everyone saying fat loss is harder? And there's a multitude of reasons for that. The main one is that more people try to lose fat. More people try to lose fat than actually try to gain muscle. Most people gain muscle by accident, right? They just train away and they unfortunately start eating in a surplus because life gets in the way or whatever. And because that, surplus, some of that goes towards a bit of muscle gain, they get some muscle gain, but it's very haphazard, right? But from the outside, it kind of looks easy and almost enjoyable. Like you were eating loads, you were training hard, and then the next time you dieted down, you had a little bit more muscle, right? But in reality, it is actually a lot harder to stick to a muscle gain diet and not just, let's eat everything in sight diet and then have a lot of fat to lose the next time around. In an ideal world, based on the fact that like we can gain maybe half a kilo of muscle per month and the fact that we can lose kilos of fat per week, we probably want to spend the vast majority of our time, a lot more time at least, actually eating in a surplus than we want to spend eating in a deficit. If we want to put numbers on it, we're probably somewhere in the range of 8 to 24 times the amount of time should be spent in a surplus than it should be spent in a deficit, based on the fact that you can get only half a kilo of muscle gain versus you can get 2 to 3 kilos of fat loss per week, right? So based on that, and when we put it in the real world, it's probably going to look like something like if you're going to spend 3 months dieting for fat loss, right? You want to spend 9 to 12 months in a surplus, or at least with the focus of gaining muscle, right? And that's the exact opposite of what most people do. Most people will spend 3 months eating everything in sight and then spend 9 months in this fat loss phase that, they go up and they go down, they're back and forth, but they never actually achieve what they want to do, Or what happens is someone will do a 3-month dieting phase, get really, really lean, have no idea what to do after that, and then spend the next months in a surplus, but way too big of a surplus, way too much, and they're just gaining copious amounts of fat, and they're not actually gaining as much muscle as they potentially could have been gaining. Why is that? Why is it not the standard practice that the vast majority of people spend more time in a surplus than in a deficit? If we're saying it makes mechanistic sense, why doesn't it happen in the real world? Well, in the real world, most people probably need to lose fat. That's where most people come to the health and fitness world with. That's where most of the general public are at. 60 to 70%, depending on the country you're in, are overweight and obese. So a lot more people are concerned about fat loss. Also, in the medical sphere, fat loss is a way bigger concern in terms of that's a lot of information is produced around that. More drugs are supplied for that. Like there's so much more help for that versus the resources that are allocated to muscle gain. You might get some research done for muscle gain in, say, sarcopenia, muscle loss in old age, but you're not really getting millions and millions of dollars pumped into research on the optimal practices to gain muscle, right? But you are getting millions and millions of dollars pumped into various things around how to get fat loss, how to sustain fat loss, how to support, obese and overweight individuals. There's a lot more money in that. And then also in the actual, free market, there's a lot more money to be made in, helping, serving people that have fat to lose, right? So a lot more of the resources go towards that, and therefore a lot less of the attention and resources go towards muscle gain, right? So we have a situation where most people are coming to this wanting to lose fat, right? And as a result, most people, very often they diet aggressively, right? With generally poor practices. They don't know how much protein to eat. They don't know how to set up a diet correctly. So they might get some fat loss, but because they've dieted so aggressively and with poor diet structure and poor, understanding of the diet, they end up in a situation where they felt that that diet was incredibly hard. And then when they stop the diet, usually they'll gain weight again because it's too hard to sustain that. We're in a situation where you've set yourself up for binge eating and probably regaining the weight. And you've also set up the situation where you only know how to diet. And even if your diet practices are less than perfect, less than ideal, that's basically all you've put your attention towards. You've never actually spent time learning how to, set up a diet correctly. So what happens next? You go on another diet. You lose weight for the next 3 months. Maybe you do it a little bit less aggressively, but either way, all your time spent in terms of actually improving your diet has been spent on time dieting, right? So that's all you know, right? And as a result, we're in a situation where all you know how to do is diet. You've never learned how to eat at maintenance. You've never learned how to eat in a surplus, right? So as a result, fat loss feels a lot harder. It's also a lot harder because food is actually delicious. And being in a surplus allows you to eat more food. So you're like, all right, cool, food is delicious. It's obviously really easy to be in a surplus. So I'll just eat more food, I'll be in a surplus. So fat loss feels a lot harder, but unfortunately, physiologically and in the real world, muscle gain is a lot harder, right? And you might be asking, well, how is that the case if we can get muscle gain by just eating in a random surplus and some of it going towards muscle gain? But the reality is that most people don't commit long enough to a muscle gain phase to actually see it through, right? To actually see like a significant amount of muscle being put on. Think about this, right? A lot of people will spend 3 months dieting aggressively, and then they'll spend 3 months in this excessive surplus, right? So we can only gain maybe, we're not the genetic elite here, so we're gaining maybe 1.5 kilos of muscle in that 3 months of the gaining phase, right? But because you're eating in this excessive surplus, you've gained 5, 8, maybe 10 kilos of body fat to go along with that. So what do you do the next time after that 3 months of a surplus is up? You go, oh, it's time to diet. I'm not happy with the physique that I have. I need to lose this fat. So you aggressively diet again, right? And maybe you lose 1 kilo of muscle while doing that, right? So now we spent 9 months and we've gained 0.5 kilo of muscle, right? Versus the person that diets correctly for 3 months, right? And then commits to 12 months in a surplus, right? But they only commit to 12 months in a surplus with a small surplus, right? Not in this like, oh, I'm gonna binge eat, I'm gonna eat excessive amounts of calories, right? So they finish their diet, they're pretty happy with their level of leanness, but they're not happy with the level of muscle mass they have. So they go, I need to gain muscle. Then they go into a small surplus, right? Maybe 300 calories extra, which they adjust over time to make sure that it stays 300 calories in a surplus, right? And they aim to gain, let's just put it at 1 kilo per month, right? And they're only gaining 1 kilo per month. We're gonna say half of that is muscle gain, right? So at the end of the 12 months that they spent in a surplus, they've gained 6 kilos of muscle and they've gained 6 kilos of fat, right? And then they spend the next 3 months dieting, right? They easily lose those 6 kilos, but because they set up their diet a lot more effectively, they're able to keep the vast majority of the 6 kilos that they gained. But even if we just compare it, we standardize it to the year, right? Someone who spends an aggressive 3 months dieting, an aggressive 3 months in a surplus, aggressive 3 months dieting, aggressive surplus, that person maybe at the end of that has gained 1 kilo of muscle, maybe 2, right? Versus the other person that spends 3 months in a deficit, not losing a lot of muscle mass, maybe 1 kilo, maybe 0.5 kilo, right? They have fat loss that they're pretty happy with. They're happy with their physique, and then they spend the next 9 months in a surplus, right? And again, at the end of those 9 months, they've gained maybe, let's just put it at 7, 8 kilos of muscle. Well, maybe not that much, but say 6 kilos of muscle, right? So that person is in a much better place when you look at the overall year than the person who just, oh, I'm going to diet every 3 months, right? So you want to actually commit to it. And it's not just time spent in it. It's not like, oh, well, I'm going to do a week of a diet here and then 2 weeks of a surplus and then a week of a diet and 2 weeks of surplus. You need to be in a surplus for a continuous amount of time, right? You need to stay in that surplus and you need to actually commit to the process, right? Because what we want to have happen is to have an appreciable amount of muscle mass at the end of that and a significant gain in muscle mass at the end of that surplus, right? And that's not going to happen over 2 weeks. Muscle gain takes time. It takes time to upregulate the processes that lead to muscle gain. It takes time to really get into a good rhythm with training, really well supplied, well nourished training. And you're going to have to build that up over time. It's not going to happen in a month. It's not going to happen in 2 months. It's going to take time. You ideally want to be in that surplus for a year. A lot of people, bodybuilders especially, they'll commit to 2 years of being in a surplus. Now it's a small surplus because you can only gain a small amount of muscle every month. They're not trying to gain 5 kilos every single month. They're trying to gain half a kilo to a kilo every single month. If you spend 2 years, 24 months in a surplus, even if you're at the lower end here of half a kilo of muscle gain per month, you might have gained 24 kilos over that, which is a significant amount. Let's say half of that was fat, half of that was muscle, right? You've gained 12 kilos of muscle. Go down to the shops there, go down to the butchers and ask for a kilo of meat. Now imagine 12 of those placed all over your body. That's a complete person changing amount of muscle. So that's what we want to do. And that's the mistake a lot of people make. They end up on this merry-go-round of, oh, I'll be in a deficit, I'll diet for a while, oh, and then I'll eat excessively for a while, and then I'm too fat now, I'll have to diet down, right? We need to get out of this. We need to escape the matrix. We need to get into a situation where you actually commit to a surplus and you actually learn how to get fat loss effectively. You learn how to do it in a time-efficient manner. That's the only way you're going to solve this, right? That's the only way you're going to get the results that you want. And it's the only way you're going to get rid of all this frustration, right? Because I know so many people are on this health and fitness merry-go-round where they're gaining, they're losing, they're gaining, they're losing, they're up, they're down. And there's no consistency. There's no strategic vision, right? There's no map to the end. That's what you need to do. You need to create that map. You need to be thinking more in terms of years rather than in terms of the next few weeks. So let's lay it out here. How do we actually fix this? Right, plan out your year. Ideally, plan out a few years. Where are we going to do fat loss? At what stage? Commit to the fat loss phase. Actually do it. Don't half-ass it. Don't, oh, well, I was doing it right 5 days and then I overate on the weekends and, whatever. Like that just it makes the process longer. That just makes your fat loss diet longer. So commit to it. But learn how to do it properly. Don't just, again, half-ass it and go, oh, I'll just eat no calories. I'll follow this crap diet I found online, etc. Learn about calories, learn about macros, set it up correctly, get the fat loss you want, in, out, quick, done. Then we're committing to a surplus. We're going to spend the rest of the year, let's say you did 3 months of that, we're going to spend the rest of the year in a surplus, 9 months at least. And the surplus, we're aiming for 250, 300 extra calories, which we then adjust over time. So if you're not gaining the appropriate amount of weight, let's just say we're trying to gain roughly half a kilo to a kilo per month. If you're not gaining that, eat a little bit more calories. If you're gaining more than that, outside of the first 2 weeks, which you're going to gain some glycogen and refill your muscles and stuff, outside of that, if we're not gaining a kilo, we're going to add more calories. If we are gaining more than a kilo, we're going to drop the calories back a little bit, or just not eat as aggressively, or stay on track. Because what often happens is you say you're eating a certain amount of calories, but there's some extras coming into the diet. You're like, oh, I'm in a surplus, so I'll just eat this, right? And not track it. You can't do that. Then after that, we have to have a plan of action for what's next. We need to know how to transition away from a gaining phase. Are we going to do a diet? We're going to try to lose some of that fat. Ideally, we've gained very little fat, right? That's the perfect situation. That's what a coach will try to do for you. But if you're doing this on your own, it's a lot harder. So you're probably going to have to get some fat loss, but you already know how to do fat loss and you know how to do it effectively, right? So you spend the next 3 months doing that. You get the fat loss you want, and then you go, okay, well, what's next, right? If you've got the physique that you want, you're like, oh, I'm happy with this. I'm happy with this level of muscle mass. I'm not just a smaller version of myself. Okay, then we can transition into more of a maintenance phase for the diet, right? And that's in a very important stage. You really have to learn how to do that. And it's kind of somewhere in between a diet and a surplus because it's at maintenance. So you want to eat enough calories to support your training. I always like to eat a little bit more than I think I will actually need, just so I can train a little bit harder and maybe eke out a few little extra grams of muscle. But you do have to still be aware of, oh, is fat loss actually occurring here? Or sorry, fat gain actually occurring here? So that's how you do it. And that seems incredibly straightforward. But I know maybe 70, 80% of you listening to this, watching this, you're not going to do that. You're going to stay on the same path. You're going to stay on the same path of, I'm going to diet for 3 months, I'm going to gain for 3 months, I'm going to diet for 3 months, I'm going to gain for 3. You're going to keep doing that, flip-flop between those two things. You're going to come back to this video in 5, 10 years time and go, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I just listen to this and actually set about doing this stuff correctly? Don't let that happen to you. These are the secrets of the health and fitness world. This is how you get the results. You spend the year, you map the year out, you spend the vast majority of your time in a surplus, and then you actually transform your physique over years. Anyway guys, if you found this helpful, drop a like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff, share it. I know it's a bit cringe, but it really does help the channel, so I do appreciate when you guys do that.